Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Edward Lucas, a Senior Vice President at CEPA, and been coming here for the last 10 years, and it's a pleasure to come back and see a fantastic audience and so many high-level participants. I still remember when we founded CEPA, people said, "Why are you wasting your time on European security? Europe is whole and free, the job is done. Concentrate on something more interesting." And sadly, our interest has been vindicated, and we have all sorts of interesting and difficult problems to discuss. We've got a great panel here. Anna Birchall I've known for many years, ace lawyer, among other things, but now the Vice Prime Minister for Romania's Strategic Partnerships implementation. Jacek Czaputowicz, Foreign Minister of the Republic of Poland since January, well known to friends of Polish diplomacy in previous jobs. Miroslav Lajczak needs no introduction, so I won't give him one, but it's great to have you back again, Miroslav. And then last but not least, my old friend Linas Linkevicius, we've known each other since 1990, I think, when we were still just talking about Lithuanian independence. So lots of expertise on the panel, and a very good, chewy subject to look at, reinvigorating cooperation or muddling through. We heard in the keynote speech the absolute importance of multilateralism. And of course, in Europe, we're blessed with many multilateral structures, more than we can keep count of sometimes. But the really interesting question we're facing now is how to fit EU and NATO security cooperation together. For years, the EU didn't really do very much on the security front. There were problems to do with the Greek-Turkish relationship. My own country, Britain, made it its business to try and keep the EU out of that space. But that's changed now. It's changed since the Lisbon Treaty with the Solidarity Clause. It's changed because of the external threat. It's changed because of the internal dynamics. So the EU really is moving ahead now with under French instigation, French leadership, with common security and defence policy, and the stuff that's really happening there. Anti-piracy was one example, Western Balkans, but there's real stuff happening. And we've also got all these other initiatives. We have a French-led initiative, we have a British-led initiative, we have a whole range of new coalitions and groupings and arrangements developing that cross the old borders. We have things that bring non-NATO and NATO countries together, non-EU and EU countries together. So that's what we're going to talk about. How seriously should we take these things? What should we be trying to accentuate? What are the pitfalls that we're going to avoid? It's quite hard to know who should go first, but I thought that we will kick off with Minister Czaputowicz, because Poland is the biggest and most central country in this respect, and then go straight on to Anna Birchall next. Then I shall have Miroslav Lajczak, who will have had a chance to catch his breath from his keynote, and then finally Linas Linkevicius. All the participants have absolutely promised, on the honour of their countries, to speak for only 5 minutes, because I really want to have a discussion, if possible, a bit of interaction with the floor. You're very welcome to speak sitting down if you like, but if you're in favour of a bit of exercise, you're also welcome to stand up and speak from the podium. But please, really, I do mean that thing about 5 minutes, and I shall tap my glass once when you reach 5 minutes, and then continue in tapping it afterwards to send the signal, the unmistakable diplomatic signal. So, Minister Czaputowicz, would you like to kick us off with your thoughts about the security integration, NATO, EU, Europe, and how to do it? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Since you invited us to choose the option, I would like to see the audience and make this introductory remarks standing. Thank you, Edward Lucas, for this warm welcome and for the introduction of the subject. Indeed, it is a privilege for me to be at the DC's largest conference devoted to Central and Eastern Europe, security in Central and Eastern Europe. This is the 10th conference, and it happens in a very interesting time while relations between the US and European Union and also Central and Eastern European countries are somehow, so to say, to choose a good word, tense or difficult. A lot of things is going on. But let me start by referring to the late Senator John McCain, an Atlantist and a passionate supporter of Poland's membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He used to say that as strong EU, as strong NATO, and a true strategic partnership between them is profoundly in American interests. Meaningful cooperation between these two organizations is no less crucial for my country, which is unlike the US member of both these organizations, NATO and the European Union. And it holds true irrespective of political colors of the governing coalition in Poland. Today, I would like to share one big picture policy message with you. NATO and the EU should not compete with each other. They should complement each other. Dramatic changes in the global security, economic and political landscape will surely require some institutional adaptation to new realities, but it should neither be an institutional revolution, in my opinion, nor an institutional separation. The strong transatlantic bond must remain intact. The NATO-EU cooperation has been an uphill struggle over the past 2 decades or so. I estimate that, contrary to my wishes, closing all capability gaps between the EU and NATO members will take some time, given the budgetary constraints of some allies, EU member states, facing today. On an optimistic note, however, there have recently been quite a few promising developments with respect to upgrading capabilities and cooperation between the EU and NATO. At the beginning of the 21st century, there was much talk about the need for operational cooperation between NATO and the EU, and yet institutional competition was hampering such cooperation. Today, with very different security threats and challenges, it proves to be possible. Those developments also confirm that NATO and the EU decision makers are serious about the declarations on strengthening cooperation between the Alliance and integrated Europe. From the document site at the NATO Warsaw Summit in 2016 up to the declaration at the summit in Brussels last July. But decisions need to be implemented. In the NATO-EU context, the declarations were followed by agreements on specific areas. Towards the end of the last year, 7 such areas were agreed upon: hybrid threats, operational cooperation, cybersecurity, military capabilities, exercises, support to partners, including on enhancing their resilience, and political dialogue between the two organizations. Also last year, in the spirit of inclusiveness, non-duplication, close coordination, and strong synergy of efforts with NATO, Poland decided to contribute actively to the newly launched European mechanisms, Permanent Structural Cooperation, or PESCO. One of the ongoing projects is the Military Mobility Initiative. Its ambition is to limit barriers to the rapid movement of troops and equipment in the EU territory, which should help us build a military version of Schengen area. I am bringing up this specific project for a good reason. After 2014 Wales summit, NATO enhanced its efforts to better the speedy movement of troops and thus substantiate its deterrence policies. Military mobility is a fine example of where NATO and the EU interests intersect. In the current security environment with alliances, enhanced military presence on its eastern flank, getting our assets where they are required is dispensable for effective defense. The seemingly positive rollout of PESCO's projects may shape the future of EU-NATO relations. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the calls for the EU strategic autonomy are interpreted by some as implying that Europe would break its strategic ties with the US and with NATO. From that perspective, the EU would aspire to act effectively on its own, ignoring constraints stemming from the fact that it is a member of a broader transatlantic community. Such autonomy, however, may also imply a strong position in the EU, of the EU as a strategic partner, a partner that is making its own decisions while accommodating the various views of others. Depending on how this idea is instituted, it can become either a modern version of a European security and defense identity, we remember that idea, within NATO, or mark a transatlantic divorce. By the same token, the European intervention initiative can be looked at from opposing angles. It may be seen as a competition to NATO and US military force in Europe. It, however, may also go in the direction of creating a stronger European military force serving both as a contribution to NATO assets, as an important instrument for purely European operation. In our view, however, the United States, Canada, and other NATO allies and the EU member states must not walk in different directions in terms of strategy. It would be not safe. Having said that, I would like to stress that in the context of Brexit, the EU has to be particularly careful when negotiating its future cooperation with London. In the field particularly, we are talking about the security, particularly in the field of security and defense policy. It is in the EU's interest to keep its partnership with the UK as strong as possible. In a view of post-Brexit reality, we have to work hand in hand if we want to effectively respond to growing threats and challenges to our collective security. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thanks very much indeed for that, Minister, and I'm sure that message will go down particularly well in London and will be transmitted there if there's any British diplomats here. It's certainly something that we worry very much, is that our security relationship with Europe is being adversely affected by the, if not the negotiations, certainly the mood around the negotiations. And I'm very interested also in this idea of what strategic autonomy means and how we can flesh that out. And thank you also for your reminder that it's one thing to make decisions and it's another thing to implement them. Anna, Vice Prime Minister, please take this and give us a Romanian perspective with similar insight and concision. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Edward. It's a really great honor and pleasure for me to be here with all of you. Let me start by congratulating CEPA. And we wish you not 10 more years, but many, many years, because we always said in our part of the world that we are incredibly lucky to have such an organization that keeps an eye on our region and understands the realities of our region. So Peter and the whole team of CEPA, thank you, and I'm very grateful for allowing me to be with you today in such a distinguished panel and audience on such an important topic, a complex topic about the NATO-EU relations. And history proves undeniable indications as to the centrality of the transatlantic link to our security and defense. The way in which the relation has developed during the last 70 years cannot be considered linear, but it certainly has been a continuous one, and I'm sure that will continue to develop this way. I can assure you that Romania has constantly supported the development of a genuine and efficient partnership between NATO and the European Union as a strategic pillar of the transatlantic relations, based on the fact that this organization shares a large number of members, but also objectives and interests that can be promoted efficiently only by working closer together. So this is a position that Romania always advocates and is strongly promoting. Romania is a country whose international profile is equally defined by a very strong pro-European attitude and also a pro-Atlanticist stance, stemming from our EU and NATO membership and the strategic bilateral partnership with the United States. The accomplishment of this goal allows us to become fully engaged in the transformation process undergone by both organizations in the last decade. Both NATO and the EU have a similar record of accomplishments in adapting themselves to the new international context, a process that, of course, cannot be considered finished and will need to continue in the years to come. A lot of progress has been made, but a lot of work still lies ahead. There are political challenges and political obstacles, but in spite of all of them, NATO and the EU have reached the stage of a comprehensive partnership underpinned by a consistent practical agenda along 7 areas of cooperation. And those are hybrid operations, cybersecurity, capabilities, industry, exercises, support the partners in capacity building efforts, with more others to follow. As mentioned, both organizations have undergone a significant process of transformation. At NATO, we witnessed a truly comprehensive adaptation process in which the consolidation of the defense and deterrence posture, including on the eastern flank, is pivotal. And obviously for us, the eastern flank is very, very important. And we are very grateful, and we were applauding the results of the recent NATO summit, where the eastern flank are an integral part of the efforts of strengthening the entire posture of the alliance. That goes together with further improving and developing NATO's partnership cooperation instruments and policies, those allowing the alliance to play a bigger role in projecting stability beyond its borders. If I am turning now to the EU transformation, I would like to underline the consistent progress accomplished in a short period along the lines of the new global strategy. The central elements of these achievements is related to the implementation of comprehensive approach by mobility in the crisis management context, the entire range of instruments that the EU has in its disposal. And here, launching the permanent structured cooperation, the so-called PESCO, was based on the broad political consensus of the majority of the member states in order to create the conditions of a genuine cooperation of new profiles in the field of the defense. And of course, the practical development were matched by vivid conceptual debates about the future of the common security and defense policy. And obviously, during our question, I'm very happy to answer any questions you have, but I would like to highlight that PESCO's real potential in stimulating the European defense cooperation based simultaneously on the political consensus and expectations around this project, and at the same time the conceptual point of view. I think that PESCO has the ingredients for generating further ways of ensuring complementarity and increasing synergy with NATO. The same goes for military mobility, which is another important strand of work initiated at the NATO level and the EU level. We clearly see the need for a more concentrated NATO-EU approach in terms of both technical parameters and geographical implementation. More interaction between NATO and EU is required, having in mind the comprehensive nature of this project. Is there a need for European countries to increase defense spending? I know, and I'm sure that all of us know the answer, and that's yes. And that's not a new yes. In fact, it's been around since 2014 when it was pledged. And when we talk about border sharing, it makes the headlines nowadays, but I am telling you that Romania is already allocating 2% of the defense. And the overall objective is to have a better response and progress will depend to a large extent of the individual cash and other kind of contributions, but also on the collective contributions of the EU and the efficiency of the cooperation with NATO. The way in which initiates initiatives such as PESCO and those in the area of military mobility develop, the extent to which we manage to ensure complementary and synergy can make a big difference in terms of fair burden sharing and should be treated as such. The main objectives is to ensure that the EU becomes a more active player in the area of security and a stronger player for NATO and the US. And I'm telling you that with the upcoming presidency, that Romania will have the presidency of the European Council starting 1st of January 2019. I think the defense and security dimension is an important part of the European project and its future. And Romania strongly supports the consolidation of the EU role in this area in complementarity with NATO in a strong partnership with the US. And I think we have a lot of questions that needs to be answered, like, for example, energy security. Energy security is not just an economic issue. It's actually a security issue. And maybe we can talk about a little bit more, including new ways of diversifying the sources and the routes, new ways of assuring the energy security, the energy independence of gas and other forms of energy, oil supply sources and routes. And in this regard, it is important to be mindful of the misinformation that is often spread around about projects by third parties, and by third parties I am assuming saying Russia, and to be aware of the need to focus public messages on dismantling these rumors and false information. And here Romania, my country, can play an important role in ensuring the energy security and energy independence in our region. Coming back to the upcoming presidency of the the EU Council, I am pledging to all of you to continue to have those discussions during our presidency. Important issues are going to be taken place, not just Brexit. And here I'm joining my friend from Poland. Romania always advocated that wherever deal we will have after Brexit, in the end of the day, UK decided to leave EU but is not leaving Europe, and that's why keeping UK as close as possible when it comes to the defense is something that we've been advocating, and obviously during our presidency we will be advocating it, having the hat of an honest broker as somebody is expecting from us, and we will fulfill that with professionalism and responsibility. I'm going to close because I don't want Edward to be on my case and to ask me to be quiet, but I think going back to the title of this panel, let me conclude by saying that it is, in the current international security context, the only option is to truly reinvigorate the NATO-EU partnership. We have made consistent progress in generating a unique framework of cooperation. As we look forward, we have to deliver on our commitments, our common commitments, be more ambitious in our joint actions, and in maximizing the visibility of our achievements as well. Because many times I discover that, as always in life, when you do a good thing, it's appreciated, but it's not making the breaking news. That's why it's up to us to actually promote how important is the EU-NATO partnership. Thank you so much, and look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Anna, and that gives me a chance to say that I think that Romania's role on the 3Cs initiative really should be recognised here. I was delighted to go to the 3Cs forum in Bucharest, and delighted also to see how much more substantial this enterprise has become over the years, and to see really heavyweight participants, both from the countries but also from other countries outside the 3Cs wanting to get involved. And I think that really highlights the way in which the non-military side of security, whether it's infrastructure or energy and economic integration and so on, takes on so much more importance in current conditions. So hats off to Romania for putting 3Cs up there and giving it extra weight. And I think we should also, so I don't know if there's anyone from the European Commission here, but I think that people often overlook, they certainly do in my country, the huge success of the European Commission over the last 10 years in building Europe's energy security, both in terms of new infrastructure, pipelines and interconnectors, in better data, in diversification of supply, and also in unbundling, forcing through the third energy package, and also the Competition Commission's attack on Gazprom. It's a really tremendous subject and doesn't get talked about enough. Miroslav, I hope you've had a chance to enjoy a brief break from your first keynote. Would you like to respond to any of these points that have been made about EU-NATO cooperation, or continue the train of thought that you started with your keynote? Feel free to come up here or speak from sitting down if you prefer.
Thank you. Since I already had my time at the rostrum, I will remain seated this time. And I'd like to be more specific now on the agenda of this panel. And first of all, I want to say that I'm glad that we are discussing EU-NATO cooperation. It's the most logical and natural thing to do. One can ask, why are we only doing it now and not why we not started many years ago? But it's good that we are here. The fact is that majority of EU members are also members of NATO, and majority of NATO allies are also members of the European Union, and therefore not to link the efforts in the area of defense and security between EU and NATO would be like ignoring ourselves. Our vision of the EU-NATO cooperation is to make Europe stronger, more mature, and more confident partner to the United States on a global scale. And as I said in my speech, we might be competing in some areas, such as trade. We do not compete on a vision for a more safe and more just world. And this is a very good point of departure for discussing our defense cooperation. And I would like to make 3 brief points. First, on multilateral solutions. We need multilateral solutions, and we have multilateral solutions. That's very important. We have adopted a very good joint Brussels declaration with 72 concrete proposals for cooperation that we can expand. But obviously, it's not the number of proposals, it's the substance and it's the implementation. And I'm glad to see that the work is taking place. And I can mention 4 areas where EU and NATO are already cooperating closely: cybersecurity, the fight against hybrid warfare, advanced technologies, and military mobility. My second point is on complementarity, and this is a very important, and the previous speakers made it very clear that for us, when we speak about EU and NATO, we see no competition, we see complementarity. So, and that's why we have PESCO. With PESCO is basically when the European Union is generally labeled as a soft power, the PESCO is here to guarantee that we shift from soft power towards the hard power. And also, what's important, PESCO comes with resources, with projects to make our defenses more efficient and better connected. So in a nutshell, investing in European security through national or EU resources is a net contribution to transatlantic burden sharing. And the same goes for military mobility, because we all agree that we need to be able to move our forces rapidly in order to defend our territories. Our national laws, our national procedures differ. Our infrastructure is not sufficiently compatible. And here, the European Union has the political and normative capability to change that for the benefit of NATO and for the benefit of our transatlantic security. And the third point is on burden sharing, even though I don't like the word burden, because it sounds as if the protection of our values is a burden, which is not. Burden sharing for us is about clarity of our intentions, about the credibility of what we do, and about our ability to act. And the truth is that the US presidents for generations have called for more Europe in transatlantic security, and the current administration is doing the same in its own way. But the fact is that since President Trump took office, European allies and Canada have added additional $41 billion to their defense budgets. And when it comes to my country, Slovakia, in 2020, we will have doubled our defense spending compared to 2014. So if we look at the development of European defense, it's about, first, putting more money into our security as such, not just defense. Second, better securing of our borders. Third, getting ready against cyber or hybrid threats. Fourth, fighting terrorists at the place of their origin. And fifth, working with our partners well beyond our borders. Any notion that a stronger and more sovereign Europe is in any way detrimental to transatlantic bond is wrong, is absolutely flawed. And finally, to try to answer the main question of this panel, reinvigorating cooperation or muddling through, I think I can quote directly from our joint declaration that says, "We are proud of what has been achieved together so far, but we can do more." Thank you.
Correct.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Miroslav. And I think it's really important to bear in mind that these things are not just sometimes low-hanging fruit that need there to be picked. Some of this is genuinely difficult. It'll be expensive. Military mobility, for example, sounds very nice and easy. It's actually quite unpopular. I lived in West Germany during the Cold War, and the Germans were not always thrilled to see roads being closed off and huge troop convoys going all over the place. And we've got to be ready to expend some political capital as well as money behind getting this sort of Schengen-style ability to move troops in large numbers, long distances. I'm coming to you, my friend Linus, last, and I hope that you, Linus, may be able to give us a little bit more of a perspective on what's happening in the Nordic-Baltic region, because for your security in the Baltics, the cooperation with Sweden and Finland are particularly important, not members of NATO. They're very close partners of NATO and also very close partners of the United States and very close partners now with each other. But these old bureaucratic divisions are sort of particularly irrelevant once one looks up at the northeastern corner of Europe. So I hope you may say a few words on that and on other things. Linus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Edward. Maybe also on some other things. As you said, I hardly can see you, but I hope you're still here.
He's there. I can see him.
First, let me also say that we were here, many of us, less than a month ago, to pay tribute to Senator Mccain. And my feeling was that we just did not just tribute to these great statesmen and this man, but it was also, well, celebrating all the values he was defending all the time. And whatever is happening now, and I hope it's also a feeling of others, we will measure and we will think what this man would say, what he will say, how he would assess, how he would react. And let's admit that some things, when they are happening in contemporary world, we are not reacting properly. I mean nationally, also by international organizations doing that, sometimes too weak, sometimes too late, we know that. So for me, this Euro-Atlantic cooperation between European Union and NATO means also something what has to do with the values, which is definitely was very important when these organizations were created. Now we are very gifted to repeat the slogans. We like to do that, but we're sometimes forgetting the meaning. And for me, it's not indifferent how these organizations reacting, for instance, to aggressive posture of Russia, where trying to change borders in Europe in 21st century, and doing that without any apology and any regret. That's important. It's important for me how we are really, in fact, everything was mentioned by the colleagues, so I'll not repeat, but this coordination and cooperation with European Union and NATO means also that we have to address mutually complementary way capability gaps, for instance. So for me, it's also important, not just 2% of GDP, needless to say, we have to do that. I agree with Miroslav, it's not burden sharing, it's something else. We have to also pay due attention, but it's also not less important output efficiency, how we are using these resources. Are we doing that in duplication? Are we doing that in some kind of competition sometimes, or are we really doing in order to make a difference? And here it comes. We have battle groups in the European Union, never used in the action, by the way. We have NRF or VJTF in NATO, and for me, as for the country which is not terribly big, it's very important to have the same single set of forces possible to use in both organizations, regardless which flag we have. It's important the operation or mission we having, but not so important what kind of flag is behind. Because as it was already mentioned, just 6 members of European Union are not members of alliance. So we can easily say that our European Union is also Euro-Atlantic alliance, basically. So what we are talking when we're talking about these duplications and really these competition aspects. Again, hybrid threats. Back to our manuals. It's nothing new, basically, but you're asking about my region, so I believe we have some experience in facing this pressure, blackmailing with regard to supply of energy resources, for instance. Now it's not the case anymore after we built LNG terminal in our seaport end of 2014. It was a game changer in the region, I would say, not only for us. And this is something we can share, how it looks like when you're changing. My colleague, Minister of Energy, is here. He will speak more about these issues, I believe, and our experience. And here I see big potential for European Union and American cooperation. I believe if they will come with the shale gas, so to say, supplies, what we're already receiving a few cargo in our seaport, and Poland, I know, did the same. This is also a game changer. More variety, more diversification of energy supplies. It has to do with the security directly, and also less opportunities to blackmail and keep a pressure. So energy. Cyber was always important, but importance now it's even higher. And what we have to do to have these meetings between European Union and United States, or NATO European Union meetings precisely on these issues, on cyber, for instance. Compare notes, best practices, centers of excellence must work together. And very good example, I was so pleased to visit Hybrid Threats Center of Excellence, European Union Center of Excellence in Helsinki. Those who never been there, I would strongly advise to visit. And this is the best example of cooperation between NATO and the European Union on hybrid threats. Also strategic communications, the same challenges, the same risks, the same threats, basically. And sometimes we're doing that separately, not in coordination. This is wrong. This is generally wrong, given the resources which are allocated by other side, billions of euros or dollars or whatever you can count, an ad hoc approach from our side, more or less, well, maybe some kind of efforts were already here, but not sufficient, definitely. I'm really happy that we managed to make a decision altogether to put this eStratCom, Strategic Communication Cell, in External Action Service, which is, again, budget not terribly big, but at least something happening. It was not so easy to do. If colleagues remember when we discussed, there were some opponents saying what we're going to do. European propaganda, censorship, what we're going to do. And it took some time to understand that we're doing least we can do, at least to withstand what's happening. Again, the same threats for NATO, for European Union, for America, for us. So I hope we will be able to address these issues in a coordinated way, mutually complementary, as I said, talking more precisely about projects we already have in our possession, and that will bring more clarity. I was asked, by the way, maybe some of you as well, what would be my main message in this conference today, and I selected one, transatlantic importance, because now it's also a stress test for transatlantic unity, as we all understand. This is really a big challenge on both sides of the ocean. And those who think otherwise, those who think that our strength is in our real unity in action, not only with regard to the security, not only defense. I'm convinced time will come for trade also. Time will come also to discuss climate changes issues. That's really will come, and we should realize that when we are together, definitely we can make a difference. If we allow ourselves to be divided, split, that will be big damage to us nationally and also multilaterally. So in order to understand this relevance, I'd like to pay tribute to CEPA as well, because this organization also considered as a transatlantic, so to say, well, thinkers, and those who can really mobilize our forces, pull together resources and manpower, able to address these issues adequately. So this is really the case. I hope I saved some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Linus. Well, I'll be very glad to take some questions from the floor. Do just make your catch my eye, and we can have interventions and points. And I shall just getting a few seeing a few hands going up already. But I think I want to just start off by asking a difficult question, which is that there are times where the interests of the United States and the Europeans diverge pretty sharply. And we see that, for example, on Iran. And this is causing quite serious difficulties. Mrs. Mogherini is very keen to save the Iran deal, and to save the Iran deal, she wants to keep the Russians on side. And so she doesn't share the enthusiasm in some parts of Europe for close European NATO integration. She's been very resistant, for example, to that European Action Service cell on disinformation. She starves it, or keeps it very, very slim anyway. And so there are real difficulties there. And so what do we do if there is the American policy on China is different from the European policy? We saw that in the past. We have different policy on Iran right now. We may have different policies on Syria. How do you preserve the EU-NATO cooperation in the sort of European theatre when the NATO, when the United States as the most important country in NATO is pulling one way, and Europe, for whatever other reasons, is pulling another? Minister Czaputowicz, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this very difficult problem you raised, the issue which is discussed when we meet with foreign minister, even we will meet today in New York. We will discuss about Iran and what to do with the JCPOA. There is a difference of opinion between the main European Union member states and the European Union as such, represented by Federica Mogherini and the United States. For Poland, I think also for countries from our region, it is crucial to maintain good transatlantic relations, because for us security is something which is the most important. We value very much, and without American involvement, it would be difficult to deter Russia. And there is a serious difference of opinion. E3 countries, because it's not only Mogherini, France, Great Britain, and Germany wants to maintain that deal, claiming that it is important for security to maintain this nuclear deal. And also it is important, it is another argument for European sovereignty. It is the term coined by President Macron. But I think that he means simply European sovereignty is something to be independent from the influence of the United States, and we do not agree with this. So the question is it for us, countries, member states of the European Union, particularly from our region, closer in terms of values, strategy, foreign policy goals to the United States or to Iran, and maybe we will have a broader coalition, China, Russia, and we do not agree with that policy. I'm talking now about Poland because we already expressed that point of view. So we have to take into account within the European Union perspective of the United States negative role Iran plays in the Middle East. So we have to be more empathetic, so to say, to the change of the American policy. But for the moment, there is a tendency to create instruments within the European Union and by European Union, which would allow European companies to be involved in cooperation with Iran. In my opinion, it will simply weaken American sanctions. So this is the problem, and this is a serious problem, what to do. Poland is member of the European Union. We are together with other countries. We share foreign policy goals. We share this, accept decision concerning the general policy, but at the same time we see that problem. So we try to argue, being within the European Union, that we have to remember about the importance of transatlantic links. And that opinion was presented by President Andrzej Duda when he talked to Donald Trump just less than a week ago. But there is a serious problem. Yeah, I agree.
Linus, we've seen
Yeah.
this before with the Iraq war as well. didn't we?
My point is just, Edward, I'd like to say that my lessons from this disagreement sometimes goes from the point that we sometimes not attentive enough to each other's arguments and concerns. For instance, it was not enough to say that GCPOA is an important agreement. It is, and we all in the European Union sharing this view. It's better to have agreement than to have nothing. At least we have some leverage. But it's not enough. It was not enough. It was important also to raise issues which are not covered by the agreement. And for instance, I was always mentioning in our discussions, but not sufficiently addressed, I believe, the ballistic missiles program, not covered, but it's important. Their possible role in the region, alleged, so to say, support to terrorist groups, also should be answered, these questions. Recent statements that they are increasing amount of enriched uranium. Again, it's possible to do, but it's not addition to confidence building in this difficult period. So these issues also should be addressed. It was not done, I believe, in some time, and now we are facing this so to say, situation. In the future, should be eliminated. We really should talk more about these issues, invite each other. Also I would mention Israel here. We know that, colleagues remember, it was more than 20 years after last visit of Prime Minister of Israel to European Union. We also took some initiative to invite him to have direct talks, which will not make a big difference after one meeting, but it should be discussion from the first source, to listen, to deny, to disagree, but it's important. It was not done. So it's also our role, I believe, European Union role. Mm-hmm. And this is definitely addressed not only for Iran, for Israel, for Middle East, for other issues. We are really contributing a lot, and resources are paid for many humanitarian projects, but we are not so to say, important player in the political management in these regions. At least it's my opinion.
Miroslav, do you want to add anything to that? I've got another question if you'd prefer to answer that.
No, I'm fine answering this one. Obviously, I agree with both Minister Putovic and Minister Linkevicius. I would only add a different perspective to it, namely, nowadays we are facing challenges that are global in their nature, which is different from what it was in the past. Whether we speak about terrorism, about proliferation, but also about migration or climate change, but these are the kinds of threats that I don't think as any single country can deal with on its own. So we need partnerships. And as I said in my speech, there is no more logical and natural partnership than the transatlantic partnership. We have issues. Yes, we need to discuss the issues where we differ. We have to listen to each other, try to accommodate each other's concerns, and you see that there are results. And the fact that the European side of NATO has dramatically increased its defense spending is a clear proof of the dialogue delivering its results. We should not catch each other by surprise. And obviously, every time we are disorganized on the global scene, we are disunited, then there are other players who are only waiting to take advantage of it. And this is not what we want.
No. Anna, any thoughts?
I should add that I think always the dialogue, it's the key. From the Romanian point of view, we've always been very pro-European, but likewise, I think we are among the most pro-European countries, around 80%, which is quite impressive given the challenges of today's debate at the EU level. But likewise, we are very, pro-American, and I can tell you that the strategic partnership, because it's in my brief, the strategic partnership with the United States is the pillar of our foreign policy. So I think this relationship from our point of view cannot be seen through the lens of competition or rivalry. Yes, but there are challenges, there are different sometimes understandings because we are living in different regions. That's why, and I'm not overstepping, and I'm not, in fact, in this case, and you, Edward, you know our region for so many years. Thank you for not mentioning for how many years you know me. But, it is very important. And, in fact, the words are not big enough to express how grateful and how lucky we are with such a think tank like CEPA, who actually understands the realities from our part of the world. And sometimes I think if we talk about the EU, at the EU level, I think one important issue is to regain or strengthen the trust. It's the trust that when we have a dialogue, yes, there are different challenges, bigger or smaller, but if we are dialoguing, and we will always find a solution. And as I said, we cannot see the relationship now coming back to NATO and the EU through the lens of competition or rivalry. It practically can offer two answers, complementary answers to the same question. How can we better address the challenges? Like Ms. Lack was talking about the global challenges, because most of the challenges that we are facing are beyond just one country or even one region.
Well, I've got two more tough questions for me, but I think we should have some from the floor first. So can we have a microphone here in the front? And Ms. Anders, can you introduce yourself for the few people who don't know you?
I'm also from Poland. I'm a senator in Poland. My name is Anna Maria Anders, and I'm Secretary of State in the Chancellor of the Prime Minister, responsible for international dialogue. I'm here more as an observer than anybody else. But this is a subject that is very, very important to me, a great interest. I think we're talking an awful lot about the transatlantic alliance. Sure, I feel more confident in the transatlantic alliance than I do in the European Union. I think the great danger in all this is the divisions within the European Union. I think perhaps somebody coming from Poland, the prospect of Nord Stream 2 is a horror for us because it eliminates Poland and Ukraine. But I think we also see Nord Stream 2 as having caused incredible fractions in Europe. And I'm afraid that we're talking about spending money on defense and beating Putin or China or anybody else. But really, energy security and fractions like that are equally important. We have Nord Stream 2. We also have the question of migrants. Brexit, we don't know what will happen with Brexit, but that is also extremely worrying. So I'm not sure who in this panel I will address that question to.
Can I suggest we address it particularly to the panel this afternoon, which is on pipeline politics? I think that will be a splendid place. We're going to have a great session of sort of rage and fury about Nord Stream 2.
Well, I think I don't want to just bring it up. I think the point that I want to make is the fact that I think the fractures in Europe are probably one of the greatest dangers here because we can't seem to be able to agree on most things.
Well, thanks very much for that. Of course, one might also say, looking at what's happening in Turkey, the fractures in NATO are pretty serious too. I think there was a question just behind you as well. There was a lady there. If you could stand up, ma'am, so we can get the... And if you could introduce yourself.
My name is Ildikó Szence. I'm coming from Hungary. I represent a Hungarian foundation, the Antal József Knowledge Center. And I would like to come back to the question, which was not really mentioned and elaborated, which is this French-inspired European Invention Initiative. I would like to ask basically all the panelists what they think about this, especially knowing that almost none of us are member in this initiative, except Estonia. And I would like to ask what you think about this, because it's not about unity, I think, within the European Union. And my second question is about the 3 Cs initiative, especially asking the minister here from Romania and also Poland, what do they think, what will be the future of this initiative? Can this be an initiative which is kind of balancing the French initiative, or what do you think about this? Thank you.
Super. Thanks for those 2 excellent questions. I think we'll probably draw a line there. There is a coffee break where you'll be able to ask anybody, you can see any question you like. But I want to throw in 2 more questions, and then we'll have a sort of final discussion. One is the question of China. We talked a lot about Russia, but China is making inroads into the region. There's the 16+1 format, which is a great format for China, a sort of beauty contest for them, where they exert political influence and offer infrastructure deals. Can we do a better job in through the EU, I would suggest, particularly in standing up to Chinese pressure. And the other, perhaps most difficult one, is that the President of the United States seems to be very interested in bilateral deals. He gets bilateral, transactional sort of deals. He doesn't seem particularly interested in multilateral organizations, whether he indeed has said he regards the EU as a kind of enemy. NATO's, he's been also pretty critical about. So how do we, or how do you, as representatives of your countries, deal with this kind of bilateral tide that's flowing, where the President wants to talk to you about deals with your country, but not necessarily in the framework of the alliance? And sometimes those deals may actually have negative influences or be a nasty surprise for other countries that are in either the EU or NATO. So we've got, those are four. Don't feel you have to respond to every topic. Anna, you'll certainly want to talk about the 3 Cs. If someone wants to have a go at deal with China and some with bilateralism, and someone on the French, how we should see the French European Intervention Initiative, that'd be great too. But Anna, I'll kick off with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Edward, for the kind words about the 3 Cs initiative. I think you all know that this started 2 years ago, and it was, it's an initiative that actually has a few objectives. Mainly is to have the interconnectivity, to really help develop our part of the region, practically the 12 countries around the 3 Cs. And likewise to have a very strong transatlantic bond. It was a great success last year in Poland, and now for Romania, we had the task of putting meat on the bone, because there were heavy expectations to really come up with concrete projects that this initiative will deliver, will have some deliverables. And without praising ourselves, I think when you look at the conclusions, we managed to really come forward with lots of projects. Romania, for example, put forward 6 projects. The projects that they supposed to be supported at least by 2 countries from the initiative. So when you look at the projects, they are in the main areas that are actually very important for today's topic as well. And that's, infrastructure. It's in digital and in energy. For example, in the infrastructure, one of the projects that Romania put forward will help the mobility, as well as other concrete benefits. In the digital as well. In the energy, we put forward to finish BRUA. We have the same approach when it comes to the Stream 2, Stream Nord 2, and we are very grateful for the U.S. Position when it comes to the Nord Stream 2. So I think the initiative forward now will be, the objectives of the initiative will be now actually to put in practice those projects that they were agreed, having the political consensus. Further, we managed for the first time to have a business forum, and we are hoping that this will continue. It was the first time when we had the business, and we had more than 600 delegates from all over, not just from the 12 countries part of the initiative, but actually from Western Balkans and other countries. We had, and here was Poland's idea, and we fully supported. In fact, Romania became a founding member of the investment fund for the initiative. And we had the network, we created the network of the chambers of commerce. So in short, I think now we showed that we can have concrete deliverables, and practically the initiative is inside the EU, because we all remember the discussions at the very beginning a few months back that this initiative has been seen as not being part of the EU. In fact, it is part of the EU and is helping, the interconnectivity is helping our region to be helped to be, to catch up, if I may say, in terms of some projects that will help our infrastructure to better benefit the whole EU, and obviously have a very close tie and presence of the US.
Can I just ask, is there any, it would seem to me logical that you should not just stop there, but you should include Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia.
They were invited, and we will continue that effort.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Super, thanks very much for that. Mr. Chapatovic.
If I may continue a few words on the 3 Cs initiative, and then also comment on China relations with Central and Eastern Europe. So, but generally, three Cs, the idea is that they are only members of the European Union, full member countries of this initiative, in order not to present it as a competition to the European Union, but it is within the European Union rather than... when you look at relations of China with the region, there are 16 plus 1. These are the same countries within the 3Cs initiative plus Western Balkan states, so a bit bigger. I think that we are aware in our region that we have to better understand policy of China. They are very active in Western Balkans, in Greece. They want to invest, but in order to face challenge posed by China, we have to be more united within the European Union. Therefore, in our policy, Polish policy, we would like to hear more consult relations with China and accept that the European Union is a main organization enough strong to face these challenges. So as far as European Intervention Initiative, I think that it is a French initiative, but I think that the second or even the most powerful country within the European Union in terms of military, it's the United Kingdom. And after Brexit, we will lose main country, which is the Security Council permanent member, nuclear power, the biggest military spending in Europe. So it will be a big loss. We published together with Linas and Theodor Melascanu, Romanian foreign minister, an article just a week ago or 2 weeks ago in Politico calling for maintaining good relations with the UK after Brexit because the UK shares our policy views, understands the role, very negative role of Russia in the region, shows interest in Central and Eastern Europe. So it is something which have to be discussed. But there are some initiatives within the European Union. In our opinion, they will be not strong enough to create a real deterrence against Russian threat, this European Intervention Initiative or PESCO. They are valuable as a means of strengthening military power of European Union member states or the organization, but it cannot replace NATO.
Thank you very much. Miroslav.
Yes. First on Nord Stream 2, I fully share what was said here, the negative opinion with regard to this project. It's a project that will weaken Ukraine, will strengthen Russia's control over the supply of energy to Europe, and it will obviously weaken European energy security. These are the facts, and if someone says that this is the project, this is a commercial project, it does not change what I just said. Plus, it's hard to believe that the project could be fully commercial when your partner on the other side is Gazprom. On the European Intervention Initiative, we have taken note of this initiative. We believe that it could contribute positively to the European security. It's really important that it does not compete with PESCO. And we understand that it's aimed at this stage at the exchange of experience, best practices, and it needs to be further elaborated. It's also good that we do not have too many initiatives, but we are rather delivering on those that are already on the table. 3Cs initiative, congratulations to Romania for a very successful meeting. I really believe that you managed to position the initiative where it should be, pragmatic, results-oriented, based on concrete projects, energy, infrastructure, and so on. So we support this understanding of this initiative. On China, I have not been actively participating in the European and NATO dialogue last year. No? Yes, but as of now, I fail to see what's the end game. What are we trying to achieve? China is a global reality, a global challenge, but it would help me to know what game are we in. And last point about the transactionalism of the US President, I'm really worried that as a result of the current trends in our transatlantic partnership, we may see European Union even more divided and more weakened. And the risk is there. And I don't think this is in anyone's interest. I don't think there is anyone here in Washington, D.C. who would be happy about seeing European Union weakened. We are the, as I said, most logical, most natural partner to the United States. Plus, this is a big game. And we are not the only players in this game. We don't own this game. I'm not sure we control this game. So if we are weakening ourselves, then obviously we are creating more space for the other players who are waiting for this. So I would really wish to have a more dialogue, more listening to each other's concerns, interests, and strengthening of this bond, because it's the only one that we have. Thank you.
Thanks. Linus, you've got 5 minutes to wrap up everything, give all answers to all questions.
Maybe not everything. On Nord Stream 2, I would add to what was said, agreeing that it was, in my view, test case for the relevance of our agreed policies, basically, because we agreed on the policies of energy union principles, and it's in odds, so to say, it contradicts, basically. And this is the lesson. And I would add, it's a pity no German representative here, but I remember our last meeting with Heiko Maas, when he agreed that this is not just purely commercial project, that there are also some political nuances. So it's a step for the understanding, and I hope we'll continue in the same spirit, because it's very important to fulfill policies we already agreed. Intervention initiative needs more information about that, basically. It could be useful, if not, again, if it not duplicate, if it will not duplicate our efforts, if not overlap, because we really have many initiatives, even battle groups, as I said, already created, not used in action, never used. So this is not a big deal to create another one, formation which will not be in use. So we really should need more information and to make it not duplicative. On China, it's a global player everywhere, in all regions, in Africa, in Europe, everywhere. And I believe it was very important to set maybe kind of verification mechanism to assess investments of China with the security aspect, and that should be done. It could be done. We are doing that nationally, basically, and all investments which has to do with the security. It's subject for our more attentive view. I believe in the European Union we also should conduct the same policy. On bilateral deals, all bilateral ties are helpful, are good, and we cannot avoid them in the future unless they will not undermine our collective efforts. So that's a very simple recipe. So it's good that we're talking, and we will be talking. The United States is our major security ally and partner bilaterally, and we feel very important their presence in our region. We would like to see, not just, as it was said, persistent rotation or whatever. We would like to see permanently rotational, as I said, troops on our region. So this is definitely something we would like to see bilaterally, which is not undermining efforts what we're doing in NATO context.
Well, thanks very much indeed for that, Linus. I just want to pull out a couple of threads from the discussion to the end before we go for the coffee break. I think one thing that's really important to get across is that this is not the transfer of security from west to east. We've sometimes, I think, let people portray the discussion of transatlantic and European security, that there are countries that take security and countries that provide it. And this is where I think the idea of burden comes from. Yeah. And the thing that really strikes me now is that we have so much experience and expertise in the countries that are next to Russia that we in the West don't always have. I'm sorry we don't have any Ukrainians on the panel, but Ukrainians have experience both from the sort of hard kinetic battlefield, from the cyber conflict, from the information conflict, from all the active measures, that is absolutely priceless. They have experienced things that we, thank goodness, have not experienced. And we need to learn from them. But also the countries represented here on the panel are all expert in their own ways of dealing with things. And I think that it's really important when we're talking to the Western people or from the Old West in defense and security and planning, just to keep on reminding that there is stuff, there are people and there are cultures and structures in these countries, whether it's hybrid war or anything else, that can be really learnt from and are valuable. I think the other thing that I just wanted to highlight is this the intervention initiative. And the way I understand this is meant to be, this is a French initiative to make sure that Britain stays firmly in, regardless of what else happens with regard to Brexit. This is a kind of, if you like, it's a rope tying Britain to mainland, to continental Europe for post-Brexit military cooperation. I'm certainly going to be keeping a very close eye on it. I also think the other countries in it all have the common characteristic. They have rapidly deployable forces, maybe only special forces, maybe a bit more. But the idea that you have, if you like, a coalition of the capable, which is going to be able to deploy in an emergency very quickly without having to go through the political structures of NATO where things may get held up, could be quite valuable. And that, of course, and that brings me on to my final problem, that I do think that these big structures suffer from slow decision-making. We haven't talked about this before. We are beginning to generate ideas for next-generation deterrence, but we are still, I think, tied up in structures that operate very, very slowly when crises develop very quickly. That's something perhaps we'll talk about at CEPA forums in the future. But in the meantime, the coffee is steaming hot and delicious, as coffee always is in this town, and I'd like you to join me in thanking our panelists for their thoughts and answers to questions.